Hey, welcome to the show, everybody. My name is Mike. I will be your host. This is the Leadership Toolkit, as you know, the definitive podcast to help grow your leadership, grow yourself, grow your business, grow all of the people that you interact with. And I am super excited. Today, I've got an amazing guest. I'm bringing to you today Mr. RJ Burr, who is a third generation producer of American oil. He's got an absolutely phenomenal and colorful background. He said he's got multiple lives in oil. I'll let him explain that as we get going. So as we get started here this morning, RJ, welcome to the show and thank you for spending some time with me today.
Hey, Mike, it's my pleasure.
Well, if you would do me a favor and if you'd take a few minutes and just share, what is your background? What's your background in business and management, in sales? We talked a little bit beforehand, how you started to expand on that. I would love to hear more, and I know the audience would love to hear more.
Well, a lot of people spend decades searching for their purpose. Some kids grow up watching their dads practice law, some watch them practice medicine. I watched my dad in oil and gas. I was on my first rig at 7 years old. And I guess I'm one of the lucky ones that I knew what I wanted to do then. When I saw that field of pump jacks, little horses going up and down, and I looked at my dad and said, "Dad, what's that?" He said, "Baby, that's money. Every time one of those go up and down, our partners are making money." Well, I was hooked. I knew what I wanted to do. Graduated high school, made my first sale 3 months later, and haven't looked back. This is all I've ever done, going on 30 plus years now. And so my grandpa did it, my uncles did it, my dad does it, and my brother and I are partners. And this is it's a family business.
That's awesome. The thing that I think is really cool, let me come back over here, is how you were saying, hey, I knew early on what I wanted to do. And so you had influence from those people in your life, your dad, your uncles, your grandfather. Can you expand a little bit? What are some other influences? What are some other people that you had that have influenced you as you've gotten, as you've come up in the oil industry, you've gotten more probably from the front line into management, into leadership as a CEO and so forth. Who are some other influences that you've had?
Oh, well, you have the typical books. I'm a connoisseur of books. I
Okay.
read. Now it's kind of morphed a little bit as I get older. I listen to books in the car now, and
Sure.
so it's little easier on the eyes. However, when you go back to it, truly believe the human is the most advanced computer on the planet, and we perform how we're programmed to perform. If you
Hmm.
program yourself with good stuff, you program with that good stuff. If you program yourself with bad stuff, heck, you're going to perform with that bad stuff. And when you
Sure.
come to people that have influenced me, oh, it's your typicals. It's your Og Mandinos, your Zig Ziglars, your typical motivational speakers. However, when it comes to shaping who I am, you have God first. Then,
Love it.
honestly, I'd look at it and say my dad and Rush Limbaugh, those two guys. And not that I agreed with everything Rush said. However, here's a man that was in a position that if he was ever wrong, they crucified him. And so he had to go above and beyond to be as accurate as he could possibly be. And you
Hmm.
learn tidbits from him. Prime example, it's easy to be negative. Anybody can wake up in the morning and have something to complain about. That's the easy
Absolutely.
part. It's hard to be positive. And so I make myself every morning get up and find something to be positive about, because the world reacts how you attack it. If you attack it with a gruff, a bat, well, guess what? It's going to gruff bad right back at you. And so the world's difficult enough. Why create your own problems? And so that's one of the main things I've learned is sometimes you can't control what happens, but by God, you can control how you react to it. And so that's just kind of the foundation of who I am. You look at it, and doesn't matter what they call it. If it's right, it's right. If it's wrong, it's wrong. And that's why God gave us a conscience. Everybody knows. You can fool yourself and say, "Oh, I didn't know," but boy, you know when it was right and when it was wrong. And that's just
Hmm.
really how what's that old saying? Anybody can be a good person when everybody's looking at you. The true mark of a good person is, what do you do when nobody's looking?
When nobody's
Well,
looking.
that's the foundation of it. Make sure you do good. Make sure you make the right decision, not the decision that's best for you, the right decision. And as long as you live your life according to those principles, it's kind of like you can tell the truth your entire life and not be considered a truth teller. but you lie one time and you're a liar. And so why lie? It is what it
Sure.
is. If it's black, it's black. If it's white, it's white. There is no gray. And so as when you set those standards up and then you live by them, it's amazing how good things happen.
I think that's we're already starting off with a ton of wisdom. I'm so blessed to have you on the show, because I sit here and I take notes, and then I try and figure out, RJ, which direction do we want to go and have a conversation. I want to, one of the things that you brought up, you said, hey, what's right is right, what's wrong is wrong. What are some things, because like you're operating at a very high level in business, and so what are some things that you weigh on to make that determination of, how do I know if this is the right thing? How do I know if this is the next right thing? How do I know if this is the right decision? Are there any, tips or tactics that you would say, okay, here's what I measure this against, and then that's the direction that we go?
Everybody has their own scales. I mean, everybody
Mhm.
has their own, judging system. Personally, mine is every night when I go to bed, I look myself in the mirror, look myself dead in the eye. And am I happy with who I'm looking at? If you're not happy, you better find out why you're not happy, because you're the only one who can fix it. If you are happy, then you're doing things right. And so that's really my matrix, and it can kind of cover into anything. Well, take the
Mhm.
oil and gas industry.
Mhm.
For the last handful of years, we've been killing it. I mean, we've been making our partners a bunch of money, and I won't get into the weeds of what we did, but basically we saw an opportunity and we took advantage of it. And in doing that, I was morally conflicted at the very beginning, because we
Mhm.
were making a killing. We were making our partners a lot of money. And I started looking at it with all the people that are hurting right now, with
Sure.
everybody, especially with energy. Most people don't realize how involved oil and gas is in their life. And
Mhm.
so I was kind of looking at, man, is it right us making all this money when so many people are hurting? And then all of a sudden it hit me. Hang on, we're all in the oil business. Whether you want to be or not, we're all in the oil business. We all pay for it. Well, if we all pay for it anyway, myself included, yet I can provide that one ray of sunshine that hopefully gets that revenue coming the other way. Well, now I've done
Mhm.
something that most people can't do, and I've provided a bridge or a shelter, and something that most people don't have a bridge or shelter for. And so once I balanced those books and said, okay, hang on, we are doing good for people. We are providing something that most people can't provide for our partners. Once I had that locked down and I was morally good with what we were doing, Katie bar the doors, give it to me 6 days a week and twice on Sunday. We're not stopping.
Love it. Well, let me ask you on the flip side of that. What happens, because you said, hey, I look myself in the mirror, that's how I weigh it. And I think some people, most people, we know, and I think you're saying it too. You just have this innate, like you have this moral compass. We know what's right. We know what's wrong. What do you do? How do you react as a leader, especially if it's a decision that you've made for your team or your company, and you realize that it's the wrong decision? How do you approach that?
You do everything you can to fix it. And once you've gone through the whole process of doing everything you can to fix it, if there is still an issue and there's nothing else you can do about it, at that point, I don't worry about it anymore. I turn it over to God. Now, if conditions change and I can
Hmm.
fix it at a later date, well, then I fix it at a later date. However, you do everything you can do. And then once you're through with your options and there's nothing else you can do, you turn it over to God.
Simple.
And it's always seemed to work well for us.
What let me ask you too, one of the things that you said here just a minute ago is as you're talking about, okay, right and wrong, and moving through stuff, we talked right beforehand, and one of the things you brought up, sorry, my brain just skips all over the place. One of the things you brought up, because you said once you were morally okay, hey, everybody's making a lot of money, oil's involved in everybody's life. Let me frame it up that way. Where are some places that oil's involved that we may not be aware of? I'm just curious.
Oh, plastics,
Hmm.
medicine, cosmetics. I mean, if I truly believe there's over 6,000 products can be made from one barrel of oil, and it is
Really?
the oh yeah. I mean, beyond energy. I mean, just set energy aside. If we solve the energy problem tomorrow, you would still have a use for all those products that come from oil. Anything with
Absolutely.
poly is oil. Asphalt. I mean, you look at. I truly believe I'd be willing to bet everything I own that you could go to any city in America and randomly grab one person, and they would have at least 2 products of oil on them and most likely not even know about it.
Like
It is
physically
that
on their
ingrained in
person.
their life. Oh yeah. Everybody has something with
Okay.
plastic or polyester or whatever. I mean, if it's there, it came from oil. I mean, and how do you think it got to you? You know, people look at inflation and say, "Oh my God, inflation's going crazy." Well, what do you think the price of oil rising does?
Yep.
Makes it costs more money to
Makes
get the
everything
product from
cost
point A to point
transport.
B. Yeah, and so you just kind of look at it, and excuse me, that's where we were
Hmm.
discussing is that most people don't realize it. You know, when
Hmm.
you look at the American oil industry and you look at who produces our oil, once
Hmm.
again, if you grabbed a random American and said, "Hey, name me an American oil company," they'd go to Exxon. They'd go to
Sure.
one of the majors. When the fact of the matter is, I don't begrudge them or anything, but they're not American companies. Just because they're based here doesn't mean they produce here. Now, they do produce some here. However,
Hmm.
83% of your oil, 90% of the natural gas produced, and more than 90% of the wells drilled are drilled by roughly 9,000 independent producers that average 12 employees or less. That's the American oil industry. That's our competition. Now, don't get me wrong, there are some very large independents out there, but for the
Hmm.
most part, your oil industry is occupied by a lot of mom and pop companies. And that is American oil.
That's crazy because we were talking just beforehand too that you were saying, it really is like a coalition of small business. That whole
Yeah.
and I would have had no idea if you had asked me before you and I talked here just gosh 20 minutes ago when we started the conversation and you'd said okay name an American oil company I would have said Exxon Mobil, right?
Yeah.
And when you're saying it like that, you're like, hey, there's so much influence on small business. Well, you're with your company is Panex, right? Speaking of which, I should put this stuff up on the screen just to. I always get into jamming and having a conversation. I forget, but if anybody wants to check out RJ's company, his company is at panex.us, and you can learn more at panex.us/learn. Also, you can connect with RJ on LinkedIn. I'm connected with him. His LinkedIn profile is amazing, so make sure you go look up RJ Burr on LinkedIn, and if as he's sharing some of his wisdom, connect over there. So, so you're with Panex. How much influence do you have, and how much? Because one of the things that you said right before we got started too is like you're a voracious learner. You said, "Hey, I had people that influence." Can you expand a little bit just from our brief conversation? You said, "Hey, I kind of had a first life in oil and second life in oil, and I really started learning a lot of stuff." Can you break that out for people here?
Yeah. Well, when I got in the business,
Hmm.
we identified it at that point in time. My dad wore every hat in the business.
Okay.
He handled everything. And when we entered business, we realized that for an oil and gas company to truly be successful, there's too many moving parts for one guy to handle them all. And so we split the business into 2 sides. We split it into the fundraising and operation side, which I jumped in, and the
Hmm.
other side was the field and the development side, the geological side. Because on the fundraising side, if you cannot fund your partnerships, you're always at the mercy of somebody who can. And that puts you
Okay.
in a position of weakness. Well, I don't like being in a position of weakness. And so we've always funded our programs from within. Well, on the other side of it, if you can't effectively drill and produce your wells and find oil, once again, you're always at the mercy of somebody who can. And so
Hmm.
when I came into business, my first day in the office, my dad sat me at a desk, put a big old thick phone book in front of me, handed me a script and a phone, and said, "Have fun." And that was my introduction. I jumped into the raising money side. My brother's first day in the office, I don't think he made it in the office for the first 5 years. He went straight to the field. And so that's really how we built this entire thing up. Now, when it comes to my first and second life in oil, as we were discussing earlier, my first life in oil, I was really in a different mindset. We were building the company. I was young. I was aggressive. And in hindsight, looking back on it, I guess I was more of a salesman that happened to be in oil than an oil man. And our first life ended when Marathon Oil bought my family's company here about 13, 14 years ago. Well, entered into early retirement. Took me about 2 months to realize I wasn't going to play on the PGA Tour, and took me another year or so to finally go stir crazy. And so it was 8 years ago. I'd finally had enough. I snap hooked one off 18. I didn't even go get the ball. Just went straight to my truck and I drove to my dad's house. And my dad and my brother were sitting out on the front porch drinking a cup of coffee. And I said, guys, I'm going stir crazy. I said, it's time to get back to work. And thank God both of them were the exact same mind. It was like, all right, we've been waiting, let's go. And that was when we started Panex. Now, the biggest difference between my mindset in the first and second life in oil, the first life in oil, we were growing, and I truly was. I mean, I was aggressive. I was one of those get you on the phone. I mean, I cut my teeth at the end of the J.R. Ewing era of oil. And so
Okay.
I was closing, that was what I did. However, in my second life in oil, it dawned on me how much people didn't know about American oil. And
Mhm.
so at that point, I made the decision to let's educate as many people as we can and show them what oil is. You look at, not to get into the green energy movement, not to go after that, but when you look at the fact that we have had a 60-year assault on a product that has lifted more people out of product than any product in human history. And they're trying to convince us that it's bad. And so you sit down and you look at it and you realize people are actually buying into this. People are actually
Mhm.
believing that solar panels, that wind turbine can actually do for us what oil does. And it's a delusion. Mathematically, it doesn't work. Like we were talking earlier, 1 + 1 will always equal 2. Well,
Mhm.
in this case, it's equaling 27, and they're telling us not to believe our lying eyes. And so you sit down and you look at all this stuff and you realize, you know what? If I don't help show people, if I don't help educate people on what is truly at stake here, well, then shame on me. Shame on me, because I was in a position to help and I didn't. And so that's really what we try to do. We try to show people what the American oil industry is and how you can benefit from it. I mean, look, the tax benefits for investing in oil are some of the greatest tax benefits out there. You're looking, Uncle Sam. Now, I'm not a CPA. I can just give you a typical rule of thumb.
It's
But
friend
in
advice, not
general,
legal advice.
absolutely, Uncle Sam's going to pay for roughly a 30-year investment. It's an above line deduction. You owe Uncle Sam. You put 100,000 in a drilling deal. You owe Uncle Sam 150,000 at the end of the year. Now you owe him 115,000, give or take. And so it's something that, man, if I wouldn't use it as a reason to do the deal. However, what kind of moron would I be if I didn't actually point it out? Look, you do realize that Uncle Sam's going to pay for roughly a 30-year investment. You put 100,000 in, you really have about 67,000 at risk,
Right.
give or take a little bit. So now what can we do with that? And then you just go and you show your company's track record, because it's really, of any investment you can make, doesn't matter
Mhm.
what industry it is, doesn't matter what you're doing. If you don't get that warm fuzzy feeling about the people you're doing business with, if you don't look at those people as people that, good, bad, or indifferent, they're going to do the right thing, well, then why would you do business with them? And so that's the first thing we want you to know. Who are we?
Mhm.
Why should you listen to what I'm saying about oil?
Sure.
And then once you see that we're the kind of people that you want on your team, now what can we do for you financially? Doesn't make a difference what I can do for you financially if you don't believe I'm somebody you should listen to. Once you see that I'm somebody you should listen to, now what can I do for you financially? And I don't know about you, but over the last 5 or 6 years, we placed 32 of the last 35 wells we drilled into production, and so we're pretty good at what we do. That's not, I'm not
Yeah.
an egomaniac. The hyperbole has killed more sales than anything, and so I don't want to sound like an egomaniac. However, at the same time, if I don't tell you who we are and what we're doing, why would you be interested in looking at us any further?
Absolutely. Well, and there's a certain level of confidence that comes with knowing, right? I mean, when you know something to be true, when you have that belief in your gut, like you've brought up several times, hey, you put God first, you got to put it in God's hands. When you know deep down, like this is the right thing, uh, that breeds a certain level of confidence. We've got a few comments which I'd love to share. Blue says, "I love the competitive spirit. Absolutely, create connections. You got to know, like, and trust people, and it's confidence, not arrogance." I think that's that. There's a fine line between confidence and arrogance, certainly. But I like RJ. You come off with a tremendous amount of confidence, even just from the moment we started talking this morning. There's a couple of things I want to ask, and I don't know which direction I want to go with it. So one, I know we've talked a lot about oil. What is your take on like solar and wind? Before I say something, I'm going to ask you, what's your take on solar and wind compared to oil? Then, what's their place?
I will put it to you this way. They discovered the first solar panel over 150 years ago. If they hadn't figured out how to make it work by now, chances are they're not going to. When it comes to wind, just look at the havoc it's creating right now. What your wind turbines run about 30% of the time because they can't, and solar is even worse. I think it's about 20% of the time they're actually capturing. However, when it comes to the math, to produce the amount of energy we have to have every year, it would take a solar field with the most modern solar panels. That solar field would have to be the size of New Jersey, and it would require the sun to shine 365 days a year, 24 hours a day at Arizona summertime intensity. And so when you look at the math behind it, it doesn't work. Now, I heard, I was speaking with Nigel Farage. I'm not sure if you know who he is. I was at CPAC here this year and was backstage and struck up a conversation with him. And we were talking about oil. And I looked at it and I said, it just doesn't make sense to me. It doesn't make sense why they would do this. And it was brilliant what he said to me. He turned and looked at me and he says, look, you can't manage and you can't control abundance. You can control scarcity. And so when you start thinking about it in that route, who am I? I don't know the reasons for us doing some of the crazy stuff we do, but I do know the actual effect of what it will do for us. You look at the environmental movement. I hate to put it this way, but if your goal is to save the environment, and that's your stated goal, but to reach that goal, we have to destroy the environment first, well, then you're not a serious person, and I'm not going to engage in conversation with you because that's exactly what they want to do. And I put the test to anybody. Don't take my word for it. Get on the internet, open up one browser window and type in oil fields and hit images. And then open up another window and type in lithium mine and hit images. You tell me which one's destroying the environment.
Yeah.
And so it's something that when you look at the decisions they're making, they don't make sense. But then you look at it from the other side. Say, okay, well, let's say I did believe in global warming. Let's say I did believe everything they're saying. CO2 is causing temperature track. Let's just say I do believe in that.
Sure.
Well, if I wanted to solve that, what would we do? We'd go nuclear or we'd go natural gas. We already have most of the infrastructure built in natural gas. Most homes have a natural gas line run to them. Most cars, you could put a converter, run them all on natural gas. Well, heck, that seems a whole lot more likely to happen without hurting us than converting to go to a solar, or you go to nuclear. You mean to tell me we can run the most advanced submarines on the planet off nuclear power and we can't figure it out here? No, we're letting a 40-year-old movie keep us scared. And so when you look at the potential reasons and what we could do to fix it, that's not even on the table. Well, if the easiest solution is not even being thought about, why would we go to the hardest solution? That's like a kid walking into a Major League Baseball field for the first time and expecting to hit a grand slam as first at bat. Look, dude, just get the bat on the ball. Prove that you belong there first.
Just get base hits.
And so you just kind of, you look at it and it doesn't make sense. And then I go back to you can't control abundance. And that Occam's razor states that the simplest explanation is most likely the accurate one. Well, in that case, that seems pretty darn clear.
Yep. Pretty and very accurate. So, when you're talking about that, here's one thing that I picked up from you, RG, as you're sitting and talking. The other piece is, and you're bringing this up, and this is what goes through my mind. You correct me if I'm wrong, but the only part that we're addressing is the energy piece. Right. Yeah. Let alone all of the other, as you mentioned earlier in the show, all of the other products, like all of the, you're not going to make plastic out of solar, like out of the, like we're just talking about the energy.
You can't, piece. It's fair. You have to have the oil for plastic.
Right. It's interesting. So here's another question. I want to go back to just the previous part of the conversation when you were talking about moving from sales into, building the business, educating people, building people up. When you're interacting with people, when you're bringing people on in your companies, when you're seeing people that you say, hey, I want to see this person grow and move and learn, what are the qualities that you look for in those people? What are the key things, like 3 or 4 key qualities that you're looking for? And I want to bring this person on with me because I want them to run with me.
Character and work ethic. It's one of those deals. I'm not one to listen to rumors. However, if one person says something about somebody, maybe they have an axe to grind. If two people say something about somebody, maybe it's coincidence. If three people say the same thing about somebody, hey, maybe there's some truth to it. If four people say the same thing about somebody, there is truth to it. And so you look at people's character, and like we were saying, what do you do when nobody's looking? That's the number one. That's the number one characteristic we look for. But number two, how hard are you going to work? It's amazing that. Well, you look at the NFL. I read an article that Sports Illustrated did a handful of years ago, and they did the comparison from 5-star high school recruits that made it to the NFL versus 4-star high school recruits that made it to the NFL. And I was shocked. There are more 4-star high school recruits that have made it to the NFL than there are 5-star. And when they go back through and look at the rationale behind it, these 4-star recruits, a lot of the time they were overlooked. They actually were 5-star recruits. However, it put a chip on their shoulder. All of a sudden, they had a drive and a motivating factor that the 5-stars didn't. And so that's where you see that character come in. And so you look at it, and how many games are won because one team is working harder than the other. And so that's just kind of the barometer I use. And when it comes to me personally, how can I expect anybody else to work hard if I'm not the hardest worker out there? And so you lead by example. Monkey see, monkey do. If I'm in here sitting on my butt, kicking my feet up on my desk, letting the day roll by, I fully expect everybody else here to do the exact same thing. And so you have to be the hardest worker and set the example. And then you set the standard. It's just like kids. Kids live up to your expectations. And if they don't, they're going to darn sure try, because that's once again, we're computers. That's how we program ourselves. If you teach your son, no, you open a door for a woman. Guess what they're going to do when they're 30 years old? They're going to open a door for a woman. Why? Because it's what they were programmed to do. It's the right thing to do. And so I know that's an antiquated example, but that's just
I think it's perfect. I think here's the reality. I think that there's a lot of things that are quote unquote antiquated or cliche. I had someone on the show, gosh, I don't know, several months back, and I remember him saying something that he says, well, yeah, he says, this is a cliche. And he says, we talk about a lot of stuff that's cliche, and it is until it isn't, right? Because then there's truth to it. And like when you're saying, hey, this is a little antiquated way to look at it, I think there's a lot of, in the basics and the fundamentals, there's a lot of quality in things that may be antiquated. I got to put this on the screen too. I know this is a total shift in direction, but I love this. Blue says he already had me ready to get me some oil money. So on board. It sounds like you've converted one investor for sure.
There's a lot to be had. You just got to know where to look.
Absolutely. So just going fast forward back to the conversation and to finish my thought, like when you're saying, hey, someone sees you open the door for a lady there, and then he's going to do that and so forth. There's a lot of value in people being able to see. We've always said in my business, my background was automotive. Like people would rather see a sermon than listen to one, right? They want to see the interaction. They want to see how it is that you carry yourself. Talking about that, how would you describe your leadership style? What are 3 or 4 characteristics that you look at in yourself that you say, hey, these are good qualities that, maybe you possess, or ones that you're chasing in other leaders that are good qualities?
Honesty. If you don't want my opinion, don't ask me. I'm going to tell you exactly what I think, whether you like it or not. Now, what you do with that, it's up to you. I can't control what you do, what I say. However, I'm going to be completely honest with you when I say it. Second one is monkey see, monkey do. Be the hardest worker and be the first one to jump in. Because if no job is too small for you, then no job will be too small for anybody working with you. Those would be the main 2. Those. And now, once again, I kind of prejudice myself to intelligence. I like intelligent people. I like people who think outside of the box. I like people that are self-starters, that I don't have to tell them what to do and just kind of point them in the right direction and let them go do their thing. I learned from Think and Grow Rich that while it's vital to know what you know, it's more important to know what you don't know, and hire somebody who does. And so that's one of the things is I don't want a center fielder who wants to be a pitcher. I want a center fielder who wants to be a center fielder. I want a first baseman that wants to be a first baseman. And so that's what you
Sure.
look for. You look for guys that are good in their lane and then keep them at what they're good at. Every time I've gotten out of oil, I've gotten smashed. Just not because I'm not intelligent. It's just I don't know that industry I got it. I know this.
Sure.
And so I stay in my lane. There's a lot of lane to stay in, and as long as we have wells to drill, I'll keep staying. We purchased, when you hear them talk about the Strategic Petroleum Reserve in Louisiana, we own all the land around it. That's where we're developing.
Wow.
That's our salt dome. And there was an acquisition opportunity here when the markets crashed in 2020, and it came available, and we locked it up, about 3,000 acres that we locked up. We think there's about 100 million barrels in reserves sitting there. Well, at $70 oil, that's $7 billion in potential reserves. We think it's going to cost us $200 to $300 million to develop the entire thing. Well, let's say we're wrong 5 times over, and it costs us $300 million. We'd still make $50 million at $70 oil. And so we put our guys in a position where I don't want to go out and drill wildcat wells. I don't want to go out and guess whether the oil is going to be there when I drill a well or not. We like knowing the oil is there. Now, does that mean we're going to hit every well? No, this is oil and gas. If anybody ever calls you and guarantees you something, they're lying to you. Hang up on them. We're dealing with something several thousand feet below the surface. Only the good Lord above knows exactly what's down there. However, what we do is we go through proven areas. I would love to say it's more complicated than this. My ego would love to say we created a new way to drive a car. But the fact of the matter is we go into proven areas and we stand on the shoulders of giants. We get what they left behind. Our favorite is salt domes. And the reason we love salt domes, they were your original oil formations back in the Wild West days of oil. They were the first geological formation that geologists could identify. Spindletop, a lot of your original oil fields were salt domes. However, salt domes are difficult to drill. You have to have a certain level of expertise to drill these wells. That's why it chases most people away. And so we like salt domes because, one, lack of competition, but two, the companies that drilled on a lot of these domes drilled on them 60, 70, 80 years ago. Well, your old oil companies, for lack of a better term, they're like spoiled kids. And a spoiled kid's favorite toy is their next toy. And so what they would do, they would go out, drill a well in one spot. They'd hit the well. They'd cut back flips. Oh, we got big oil. They'd be producing. Well, then they'd go out and they'd drill next handful of years, 10, 15, 20 wells surrounding it, produce all this oil. Well, remember, this was back in the 20s, 30s, and 40s. They thought they had produced it all. All of a sudden, they hit a well 5 miles away that's doing big numbers also. Well, they pick up their entire operation, and move over there. Well, how much oil did they leave behind? Now, in some cases, none. In some cases, they fully developed the salt dome, and there's no use even looking at it. In a lot of cases, they left millions of barrels. On this Choctaw, we think they left 100 million barrels. We literally have dozens of wells where we have the original well. It's all public information if you know where to look for it. We have the original well drilled. Like I'm drilling a well right now. We have a well that was drilled in 1940, a well that was drilled in 1953, and a well that was drilled in 58. But these 3 wells, we have the logs on these wells. We see the pay zones that were in this well. Well, when you look at the production record from the wells, they show 40, 50,000 barrels. And we're like, these wells should have 500,000 to 1.5 million barrels of oil sitting in them. Why did they only produce 40, 50,000? We have dozens of wells just like this across the field. Well, when you go in and do the research, what you find out, really they had 2 problems, greed and sand. And here's what I mean. Imagine you had a big gulp in front of you with crushed ice filled with Coke. Well, if you wanted to drink that big gulp and not get any of the ice and you didn't have a straw, you'd have to put your lip up against the cup or use your teeth and block the ice and slowly drink it just to get the Coke. Well, that's how you have to produce these wells.
Interesting.
If you don't, what these guys did is they just opened their mouth and poured the whole Coke in. They were competing with people around them trying to be the biggest producers out there, be the biggest swinger out there.
Sure.
And so what they'd do, they'd hit these wells, they'd turn it wide open. Yeah, you'd get a lot of oil. Here comes the second problem. These wells produce a lot of sand too.
Sure.
Well, next thing you know, they suck on it real hard. They turn a beautiful well into a 5,000-foot column of cement, and their well's done. And they just walk away. And so you look at these. Well, if the oil was there 60 years ago, it should still be there. Difference is now we know how to deal with the sand. It's still a pain in
Gotcha.
the butt, but we know how to deal with it. And
Yeah.
so
Well,
what we do is
technology changes.
we go out and we look at these wells. Okay, the oil should be there. And so we just move over closeology, get as close as we can to a proven producer and drill another one. And we drill another well. Well, on this field in the last 3 years, we've done that 5 times. We've hit all 5 of those wells. Those 5 wells have turned into another 25 wells we'll need to drill to develop that fault block. And so it's kind of like harvesting oil. Now, once again, it doesn't remove all the risk. We still have to go out and drill the wells. There's still risk when it comes to drilling it. However, the fact of the matter is, every time we put a drill bit in the ground, when we've reached total depth, we've produced that well. In this field, we've placed 10 of the last 11 wells we drilled in production.
Wow. So
And
I want
overall,
to
32 of the
recap a
last
couple
35.
things that you said, because there's so much that's just like man, RJ, I love your passion for this, man, because you get into talking about it and jamming on it, and you got to like I sit here in awe as I listen to people and I take notes, and I'm listening and learning about the industry. It's about a different industry. You're in leadership in a different industry than what I'm familiar with, so I enjoy that, and I hope everybody else out listening is enjoying that as well. The other thing is I hear these little tidbits of lessons, these little pieces of wisdom, and I want to bring 3 that just from that last conversation. One of the things that I heard you say is you said, "Hey, we stand on the backs of giants." And I think that's so important when it comes to business, it comes to leadership. There are people that were there before you, right? In leadership roles. And oftentimes the only thing that'll get in the way is ego, right? Instead of us just saying, "Hey, okay, well, yeah, these guys or these gals, these people did this and they did it right. And so use that as a springboard." Tony Robbins says, success leaves clues. And I think that's really, I think that's very wise of you. It's very simple. You said earlier, simplicity is something, but standing on the backs of giants, and for anybody listening, like, keep that in mind. That's so valuable to know that the people that are out there, as you listen and you're learning and you're pushing yourself forward, people that came before you and they did it right, and they opened doors for the lady, and they drilled the wells and so forth. And it's like, if they're doing that, it's because a lot of that stuff works. And so you have to be willing to bruise your ego and not let that get in the way. The second thing that I heard you say in a sort of roundabout way was just staying consistent, like being willing, having that tenacity to continue, right? So often, and I think this is one of the things that I liken it to is, kids are some of the most risk resistant and tenacious, and you have kids, right? And we watch our kids, and they're like tenacious as can be. They just keep going, they keep going, they keep going, and we're like, "Hey, stop. Okay, just stop it." And when you were talking about that, you said, "Hey, there's a certain amount of risk, but we just keep going after it and we keep doing it," and you're hitting this stuff. And I think that parallels when it comes to leadership and management and entrepreneurship anywhere in business. One of the things that will take you far, you said earlier, was work ethic, but it's also consistency, right? Isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, Vince Lombardi said it better than I can. Everybody wants to win. Doesn't matter who you are. Everybody wants to win. What separates the winners from the losers? Winners are willing to do what losers are not. And that's part of it. That's working hard. That's making sure, opportunity meeting success, luck and success being together. It's one of those that, it's amazing how lucky hardworking people are. It's amazing how lucky people are that put themselves in a position to win. I tell my kids, control what you can control. My second oldest son was a huge baseball player, and I'd talk to him. It's like, "Baby, can you control whether that umpire calls a ball or strike?" No. Can you control whether that fielder fields the ball or not? No. What can you control? What pitches I swing at? Exactly. Yep. When they put one over the plate, hit it. If you don't, you're the only one to blame. You can't blame anybody else. And so control what you can control and let God take care of everything else. Because if it's out of your control, by definition, it's out of your control. There's nothing you can do about it. So why worry about it? Because when you start worrying about something in life, and me and my wife have not arguments, but we have disagreements sometimes because I never get worried. I might be worried inside, but I never let it show. Because when you worry about something and you worry and fret and worry and worry and fret and keep all worry, Well, guess where you're at the end of that? Right back where you were when
Same
you
place.
started worrying. So going back, you do everything you can do. And then once you've done everything you can do, at that point, you turn it on over to God and don't worry about it because there's nothing you can do for it. Now, if the circumstances change and an opportunity presents itself where you can do it, you jump in and do it.
Both feet.
However, yeah, I mean, it's just something that it's really simple stuff. I mean, I was listening to you when you were talking about the 3 points earlier. We've lost something as a society that really breaks my heart in the sense that we don't celebrate excellence like we used to. I love excellence. I love somebody being the best at something. Doesn't matter who you are.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't matter if it's underwater basket weaving. If you are
Mm-hmm.
the absolute best at doing it, I want to watch you do it at least once. I want to see what it means to be the best. Well, I look at the oil industry, and that's what breaks my heart really is most people don't realize that oil has lifted more people out of poverty than any product used by humans in our history. Yet we have been under a 60-year assault trying to convince us that it's bad. When actually, let's get into the green argument in the sense of, do you want to know where all the CO2 reductions have come from? The people in the oil industry learning how to burn their oil cleaner.
Right.
And so you look at all that, and it's like a willful denial of reality that they're asking us to, and that's what hurt. Pride not makes me angry, but it's look, I love the oil industry. I love oil. I love what it does for us every day. Go talk to the Germans. Do you think they'd rather have their gas from mean old Vlad, or they'd rather keep cutting down their pristine forest to warm their homes through the winter? I think they'd rather keep going to Vlad. Now, when you look at worldwide and why oil is something that's not going away, 83% of the world's population is just now beginning to use oil. What do you think they're
Wow.
going to do? When they realize that utilizing oil brings you from third world closer to first world and improves the lives of you and your family, do you think they're going to say, oh, Greta's right, we're ruining the world, let's shut it down and go back to the Stone Age? Or are they going to tell
No.
Greta to kiss their butt and push the pedal down and go forward?
Every
No,
day.
humans want to better their lives. It's a human instinct. And so the demand for oil is not going anywhere. Now, how does that affect us on a day-to-day basis? Well, if we had enough to cover that demand, oil prices would stay the same, but we don't. In 2013, we invested roughly $1 trillion worldwide in upstream development, finding more oil to replace what we produced. We're going to be lucky to hit 400 billion this year.
Really?
So drilling upstream investment in oil has gone down 60-70% over the last 10 years. Well,
That's wild.
we're not investing enough to replace the oil. Well, currently we're running about 10-15 million barrels a day short on what we consume versus what we produce. They expect that to be around 30 million barrels in the next 10 years. Well, so we're not investing enough to replace the oil we produce. We're consuming more than we produce, and there's nothing to replace it with. What do you think is going to happen to prices? Once again,
Supply and
it doesn't
demand.
take a genius. Yeah, it's simple math. Well, so then you look at it and say, well, hey, who's doing all this investing in green energy? Well, it's amazing. You want to know who a lot of it is? Exxon, Shell. Look at all your major oil companies. Well, this is information you can find.
Sure.
Don't take Jay Burr's word for it. Here, I'm sitting here in Bowling Green, Kentucky. If I can get on my computer and I can find this information, anybody can. And so when you sit down and you look at it, you go, why would all these oil companies put money in green energy? And really, I'm kind of a binary person. It's one of two reasons. One, they're altruistic. They truly believe their product is destroying the world. And so they're willing to wreck everything they spent generations building all in the name of saving the planet, wreck their company, wreck their stockholders' money. Who's to say that's not what they're doing? They could be doing that.
Could be.
Or they're doing it for monetary reasons. One, what happens when you invest in green energy? You get social loving. Man, look at these good guys trying to save
social
the earth.
living.
Secondly, they get tremendous tax benefits.
Sure.
But here's the dirty little secret. They know what I know. They know that route's not going to work. Well, what happens when when everybody comes out from under the ether and realizes that as well? How much do you think the oil they already have is going to be worth at that point? So I don't know which one of the two they're going. I have a good idea on what I think. But when
Sure.
you sit down and you put the whole picture together, we're sitting in a position where Americans are about to get crunched for energy. And if you can put yourself in a position where you protect some of your income by buying oil, man, you'll look back 20 years from now and go, I dodged a bullet on that one.
Sure.
Because it's there. The coloring book is there, and they've already colored all the outside lines. So you don't have to worry about going into the margins. All you got to do is color in the picture. It's there. All you got to do is look at it.
That's wild, man. Hey, I have two other questions I really want to get to. One of them is because we talked about what are some characteristics and key things of leaders, and we've just been done a whole bunch of different places to have some of these discussions, and you make really good points. What would you say are some leadership weaknesses? What are things that people should steer away from? Because you have people in leadership roles. You have people in leadership roles that are like, and you've looked at them in your career. And just let me frame this too. This is not necessarily stuff you possess, right? It's easy for us to look and go, "Wow, that sucks." So, what would you say those are?
Inconsistency. When
Okay.
that's I would say that's the biggest deterrent when it comes to me. Having a sales room and saying, "Oh, we're going to have meetings every morning at 9:00," and you do those meetings for a week, and then all of a sudden they stop. It's being consistent, and then all the do as I say, not as I do people. No, that doesn't work. The because I said so. No, it's not
Sure.
because I said so. This is my money we're talking about. I want to understand it thoroughly, and if you're not willing to explain it, then we're going to have an issue. And so it's really just in character. I mean, a person's character is huge.
Mhm.
That's a big key to me, because there are enough snakes in the world that will bite you just out of the sheer function of biting you. Well,
Sure.
if you can weed that, and I'm sorry, nobody will ever be able to eliminate all the snakes from their life. If you're in business and you're successful, people are their snakes try to figure out a way to get onto the boat. And so that's really what you have to be cognizant of, is look for people's motives. I've learned a long time ago, somebody who is in the boat with you is more amped to paddle much harder than somebody standing on the shore telling you how to paddle. And so
It's a good
we always
analogy.
put skin in the game. We will, in any partnership we do, we have more money than any of our partners in the deal, just because we want them to know that, heck, without you, we don't have a business, but we believe so much in what we're doing that we're willing to be the biggest investor in it. And so that gives people confidence. And then the fact that we pay our partners first. Our partners get every bit of the revenue we own until they have 100% of their at-risk money back. And so we want you to know that, look, we don't get paid until you're paid out, until you have your money back in your pocket. And so, once again, that doesn't guarantee success. However, it does give your partners a sense of comfort knowing that, hey, look, if this doesn't work, I make my money out of the ground, not on top of the ground. A lot of oil and gas companies, and that's the scary little truth, is a lot of oil and gas companies, if they need 1x to drill a well, they're going to charge 5x. That
Wow.
way, it doesn't make a difference what the well does. They've made their money on top of the ground. Well, we
Hmm.
make our money out of the ground. And so
That's
that's
good.
kind of where I'd go leadership wise. The main thing I'd look at is character.
Yeah.
It's just that's because you can have great personable. I mean, look at Bill Clinton. Bill Clinton was one of the most dynamic speakers I've ever seen. He was very good. However, when you look on a character level, man, he'd be looking up at snakes, and
Yeah.
so it's not being able to make a great presentation. It's somebody's consistency and their character. That's the key.
I love that. So do me a favor. We're kind of coming to the tail end here. We're about almost an hour in. I'm curious well, a couple things. One, I would be remiss not to mention, let me go over here. And for anybody that is interested to learn more about American Oil, about Panex, you can go to panex.us/learn. And for also for anybody that's listening to the show either on the podcast later, make sure and look up RJ on LinkedIn. It's RJ-Burr, BURR dash. There's a bunch of stuff afterwards, but that's his actual link. So if you just look up RJ Burr, he's easy to find there.
I'm not a dentist.
No, definitely
You'll
not a
see
dentist.
there's two when you enter RJ Burr into the search engine, you'll get me and a dentist. I'm not the dentist.
You're not the dentist. So any final thoughts, RJ, sort of to take us out today on leadership, on business, on things we've discussed?
Well, I had my daughter's 17 and she's about to graduate, and she had a handful of her friends over for Christmas last year. And yeah, I felt compelled. It was just, here these kids are about to take on the world. And so I wanted to give them something that would benefit them. And so I thought about it real hard, and I came down to them and I said, look, guys, I said, I'm not trying to be mean. I said, but I want you to understand, the minute you graduate and the minute you step out of this high school world, I want you to go look in the mirror. Those good looks, those athletic abilities, everything that makes you who you are right now, go ahead and throw it out of the window, because none of it matters when you get to the real world. Do you want to know what matters? This muscle right here. That's the only one that matters. You better strengthen this one up. And I gave them Think and Grow Rich and Rich Dad Poor Dad. And it was one that, look, guys, if I can give you a foundation of knowledge, here are the first two books I read. And that's the only way. If you don't build that mental, and so when it comes to leaving here, when it comes to leadership, know what you know. When you have something that you don't know, find somebody who does. If it comes to my health, I go to my doctor. If it comes to my legal, I go to my lawyer. When it comes to oil and gas, they come to me, because this is what I'm the expert in. And so whether you want to participate in oil, whether you just want to educate yourself on oil, that was the reason we created panx.us/learn. That page was designed specifically for individuals who had never looked at oil and gas before. It gives you a basic, fundamental, foundational knowledge of oil, what we do, why we do it, what products are involved in oil. Then we show you the tax benefit side. We want you to know what you're looking at. Now, once you're done with that, if you want to see what oil can do for you, please reach out. We don't high pressure. I don't twist arms, yank hair. I'm beyond that stage in my life. Typically, my programs fund before I really even go out and start trying to sell them. And so please come in and look at what we're doing. Kick every tire. There is not one question that you have that you shouldn't ask. If you have I don't care if it's a little hair on your pinky toe. If it has a question and you don't ask it, shame on you. That's what I'm here for. Now, Absolutely. If I can't answer your question satisfactorily, don't invest with us. I'll be the first one to tell you that. However, when we do knock your socks off, when we do show you that we can make you some money and save you some tremendous money in taxes, heck, at that point, don't even jump in head first. Walk up and stick that big toe in the pool. Make sure we're the kind of people you want to swim with before you jump in head first. But that would be the main thing I say, is just educate yourself. Make sure you know what you're saying yes or no to.
Love that. Education is key to so much success. So I appreciate your time today, RJ. If you would just hang out for 1 minute, I'm going to go ahead and take us out. I appreciate you very much for coming on the show. And I look forward to having some more conversations with you.
My pleasure. My pleasure, Mike.
Absolutely. And that, my friends, is going to bring us to another episode, or to a close of another episode of the Leadership Toolkit. Thank you, everyone, for taking your time, investing your time with us, and, listening in, sharing in a lot of RJ's insights, his wisdom. Make sure, as always, I'll recap the show. I'll have show notes. I'll have a blog. I'll make sure and have a link. So if you're interested in checking out more on RJ's company and the education that he has to offer, and re-listening to his leadership insights, I would really appreciate it. Thank you again for your time this afternoon. And until we speak next, stay great. We'll talk soon, everybody.